one of the first questions I had to ask Todd Bowles was, early in the off season, the first time they came together as a team, he said, we're raising our expectations. We're not talking about winning the division. We're talking about winning the whole thing. And they really got into the Super Bowl talk and the Super Bowl conversation right away. And it was kind of like, well, why not us?
Welcome in to the NFL on Fox podcast. I'm your host, Dave Helman, and we're rolling now. We're on to week 2. We're into the routine of things. You're kind of getting the feel for how the NFL season goes. Great week 2 slate, starting off tonight with a banger of a Thursday night game. AFC East divisional rivalry, the Buffalo Bills going down to Miami to get things started with a boom. Love that. You love when the Thursday night matchup is exciting. We're going to get to that later. We're going to get to every game on the slate. If you're not, make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you're following along for every single show. We've got recaps. We've got previews, great guests, great interviews. Just so excited for the season to be back. Go ahead and subscribe on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your pods. You can find us on YouTube. You leave us a comment. Please be somewhat nice. Maybe we'll, answer back if you ask nicely. Find us on social at NFL on Fox Pod, however you prefer to do this. You can find us somewhere. We appreciate it. All right, like I said, it's a fun week 2 slate, and even more fun week 2 preview for you. Got star-studded lineup. Greg Olsen topping on to talk about his game in Green Bay, the Packers potentially with a new quarterback going up against the Indianapolis Colts. We've got Moose Johnston on the call for a huge NFC game. The Detroit Lions hosting the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So much to get to. Let's start it off, though, with a pair of early games, both interesting, both in the separate conferences for separate reasons. We've got the Dallas Cowboys hosting the New Orleans Saints, the upstart New Orleans Saints, who had the most lopsided win of week 1. We'll turn our focus to the Saints. Tom Brady's second call. He will be down in the Dallas area calling that, as well as, maybe you've heard of it, one of the biggest rivalries in the NFL over the last 3 years, the Kansas City Chiefs hosting the Cincinnati Bengals, who lost their season opener to the New England Patriots and now try to bounce back against the best team in the NFL. No troubles, Joe Burrow. Just go get it done. To do that, we've got a guest for both of these matchups. Our own Fox Sports reporter, Greg Auman, stopped by to help me dive into Dallas Cowboys, New Orleans Saints, as well as Kansas City Chiefs, Cincinnati Bengals. All right, Greg, let's start things off with a game that looks a lot better right now than it maybe did before the season started. It's early game right here on Fox, this week's Tom Brady game. My former home base of Arlington, Texas, I guess not technically Dallas, where you will be. It's the Dallas Cowboys hosting the New Orleans Saints. And let's start out there, because I just said this game looks a little bit better than we might have thought. How much are we buying what I think was probably the most dominant performance of week 1 by the Saints? Like, was that more Saints or more about Panthers being bad? What do you think?
I think definitely a good part of that is Carolina's defense really looking rough, being hurt, being shorthanded when they're going to struggle when they're at full strength. So I think New Orleans looked great for a first game with a new coordinator. Derek Carr played well. Alvin Kamara ran the ball well. The offensive line held up. I think the pass rush they're going to face in Dallas is a little tougher than what they had against Carolina. But no, I mean, they put up 47 points and kind of eased off on the gas in getting to 47. So if they can do that again on Sunday, that'll go a long way towards a win.
I think that's the interesting part is like, yeah, I mean, the Saints were calling off the dogs by like halftime of this game. Like it's not even
30-0 at halftime.
It's not even like a full 60-minute sample size of Saints football. So in addition to not knowing, like week 1 can be deceiving, it's not even a full game of week 1. So I'm interested to see how this plays. You mentioned, I mean, Derek Carr played really well. The Saints offense looked as good as it has in the Derek Carr era last season, plus this one game. And the thing you mentioned, the Dallas pass rush. What was your takeaway of how the Saints held up, because that's always been the question for this Saints team is if you can keep Derek Carr clean, you'll probably be pretty solid. If you can't, it might look kind of rough. You have any takeaways of how they held up in this game? And look, I know it's hard to project going against Micah Parsons and company, but how this might look in week 2?
I just think for the Saints offensive line, the difficulty level goes from 1 to 10 in 1 week. And handling Carolina, I mean, you get up big to where you're not having to, I think you kind of run the ball as much as you want kind of thing. And now, I mean, maybe they get an early lead in Dallas, but that's probably the most formidable individual player and also a pretty heady front in general they're going to have to handle. It's still a fairly new line. Rookie left tackle looked good. Penning held up. So, I mean, they should go in with as much confidence as they can after one game because they played a really good game on offense. Defensively, they kind of held Carolina in check. I don't even know, again, if that says that much. But they'll have their hands full. I mean, this would be a huge win for them. They could pull it off. Dallas is in a little different place where Dallas, put up 33 points, but they got a special teams touchdown. They probably want to play better offensively, even though they had 33 points. I think they had only 15 first downs. They weren't dominant offensively by any means.
I'll get to the Dallas offense in a minute, but I'm going to ask you to play coach for a second because it is interesting. You got rookie tackle Talisa Fuaga, the first-round pick, making his second start on the road against a great pass rush. And you mentioned Trevor Penning as well, who has clearly had we'll call it a rocky start to his career since being a first-round pick a couple years ago. If you're Dallas, which one of those matchups is more enticing to you? The highly touted rookie who has looked very good in this brief sample size, or the veteran who has been a bit of a problem spot?
I mean, it might be Penning. I mean, I think, Fuaga, this is easily, one of the biggest names he'll face all season. So you might be able to hit him early and surprise him. But I mean, Penning is probably the more questionable one right now. He's changed sides, has struggled at left tackle. Could very well, I mean, there's other instances where guys have switched sides and it's the answer is what they needed to click and play at a more functional level. But, Dallas, this is one where, I mean, if I'm New Orleans, the first priority has to be keeping Carr upright, which means max protect, which means getting rid of the ball quickly, not letting that defensive front take over the game.
It's funny to see both of these teams kind of were able to call off the dogs at halftime, really. I mean, I don't know how hard Dallas was trying to execute its full offense after that Cavante Turpin punt return in the third quarter against Cleveland. So it's going to be interesting if this game script stays neutral to see who has more success just running their bread and butter plays. I wanted to talk to you about the Saints secondary, which as of right now, we'll see what happens with Marshawn Lattimore. That's obviously a big thing to watch. He's dealing with an injury. He may not be available for this game. I don't know that the Carolina offense is a true test of their abilities, but I do think this is a group that can make life difficult on the Cowboys, especially when you consider, obviously, everything's going to go through CeeDee Lamb. I don't know if you shut CeeDee Lamb down, but do you agree with me? I think this is a group that can at least limit Lamb and make the rest of this Dallas offense pick up the slack.
No, I think that makes sense. Honestly, it's one of those where, I mean, again, if Lattimore's in there, that makes things more complicated. Their second safety spot in New Orleans is a bit of a question mark. I think they wanted to bring in Justin Simmons and couldn't do it. Jordan Howden, had an interception last week against Bryce Young, but again, it's a much more difficult challenge, even getting beyond CeeDee Lamb. I mean, I think we've talked about the lack of depth in terms of options there in Dallas. I mean, it's not just shut down CeeDee Lamb and you're done. I mean, I think they won on Sunday against a really good Cleveland defense without a lot of big plays. I think they had one play longer than 16 yards the entire game. I think Zeke rushed for 40 maybe. So they didn't have to do that much. This will be a closer game. This will be a game where both have to test themselves for 48 minutes in a way that, for 60 minutes, I should say. It's just a different challenge. Both of them won. I think what Dallas did is more impressive, even though Cleveland's offense didn't show very much. I think Cleveland's defense is still a really strong unit. So to get to where they got, where that's a 27-3 game and the game's out of hand, that win probably means more than dominating what's ultimately a bottom three bad Carolina team.
Yeah, and it seems like that's reflected when you look at everything for this matchup. I mean, the Saints won by 37 points, and the last time I checked, they're a touchdown underdog at AT&T Stadium. So
Right.
plenty of people still thinking that the Cowboys have the upper hand in this. But I don't know. Like, I think, and of course, I'm going to look like an idiot when Dallas does their patented thing where, they get a couple takeaways early and, go up 14 or 17 points and just let Micah Parsons tee off. But I think this has the potential to be a really good test for them. The offensive line looked better at protecting Derek Carr, but on top of that, they ran the ball for 5 yards a pop against Carolina. I know it's Carolina, but at the very least, I think this is a more robust test of Dallas's run defense, which was such a problem for them last season.
Well, you think New Orleans scored 47, Dallas scored 33. That's 80 points between the two of them. This isn't really a high over under. I think it's like a 45 point over under, to where you kind of like the points. You like that. I think there'll be some scoring. Dallas had a special teams. There's the possibility of a defensive score in this game as well. So no, I think it's one of those where New Orleans is going to have to score a lot to outpace Dallas in this game. But if last week is a sign, if they can get Rashid Shaheed deep and get another touchdown that way, Olave didn't do that much last week. There's more they can do. New Orleans got 2 touchdowns from tight ends, probably more from their run game than most people expected. So it could be that this is one of those where the secondary characters for each side, whichever one of them can step up and show and make plays, that could make it a different game.
I'm interested to see Taysom Hill's role in this game too. I think the last time he saw the Cowboys, he was playing quarterback and Micah Parsons was teeing off on him a few years ago. More of a complimentary player now. The Saints just continue to find fun ways to use this guy, and maybe he can play a role as a runner and a receiver. I'm sure they're going to come up with wrinkles to utilize him in this game, especially when you talk about keeping a pass rush off balance.
Right, absolutely. And he's a guy where, again, if week one, maybe you didn't want to get too complex in Kubiak's first game with a new team, you can start adding wrinkles. And he's definitely the first guy you think of with that. Barely threw passes last year. When he played quarterback, he was largely a threat to throw, but a guy that ran. But yeah, they've talked about using him much more elaborately. We didn't see a ton of that in week one, but he's, if you think about X factors and people that will at least make Dallas work harder defensively, he's the guy you can use to make their life harder defensively for sure.
I don't know how much it affects the matchup, but like just a sneaky, intense game on the schedule too. Like, I'm not going to go as far as to call it a rivalry, but I don't know if people outside the region realize, look, Dallas, Texas and Louisiana are right next to each other. Dallas is not far from New Orleans. There's a lot of Saints fans in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. There's a lot of Cowboys in Louisiana. So for a noon kickoff in week 2, I expect this game to have a little extra oomph to it. If past additions are any indicator.
Right. Absolutely. Not far geographically. There's, a tropical storm or a hurricane going somewhere between now and Sunday. No, it's a game where, if you're New Orleans and you're trying to validate yourself as a team that will be for real, this does it in a way that beating Carolina by no score would do. There's not enough points you could put on the board against Carolina to really make a statement. If you go into Dallas and win, it's a statement win for New Orleans.
It's a very good point too. Hurricane Francine coming ashore as we're recording this. Best wishes to everybody in South Louisiana, all that region. Hopefully you come out of it safe and okay and can enjoy a very entertaining Saints Cowboys game on Sunday afternoon. Let's take it up to what would probably be the game of the weekend if the Cincinnati Bengals had handled business. And it's Chiefs Bengals at Arrowhead. Don't get me wrong, Greg. It's still a really big game. But after what we saw week 1 from the Bengals, it deflates that balloon just a little bit where you're like, is this, what are we doing here? The Chiefs, again, they're almost touchdown favorites themselves. It's not what you expect from this matchup. The AFC championship games and all that good stuff. Slightly deflated, but still a hell of an opportunity for the Bengals to sort of reestablish themselves as a team worth taking seriously after last week.
Right. Burrow versus Mahomes, that's a matchup you expect in January. So to have it here in week 2, it should carry a lot of weight. But if they can't beat Jacoby Brissett, that's a different problem. Cincinnati's offense didn't look right. They've had, again, as much as Dallas kind of solved all of their offseason turmoil and put a neat bow on it right before the season started, and the Bengals have Burrow coming back from injury. Chase has been, missing in action, is just now back, probably a little rusty. T. Higgins is kind of playing, but obviously a guy that's probably moving on after this year. So I think they're a team where things didn't come together in week one, and offensively they didn't click enough. So that, I mean, if there's a team that has lower expectations than Carolina going into last week, it probably is New England, and they went out and won. I mean, there's not a lot that they did, but it was enough to beat Cincinnati. And I mean, that's a team, again, Cincinnati's a last place team last year, but they're doing so in probably the best division in football. And they're coming off a 9-8 season. If you think about Cleveland probably being a little bit lower down a peg from what we thought, Cincinnati's a team that has to take advantage of that. Whether they can get into that Pittsburgh and Baltimore level of the AFC North, I don't know. This first week made it seem like you don't know who they are. But again, it's the same thing that New Orleans has. If they can go into Arrowhead and just hang with the Chiefs and just make it a game that's worthy of those two quarterbacks and the showdowns they've had in the past, then you can kind of write off week one as just maybe one of their bad games. And Cincinnati is back to, I think Cincinnati was 5th highest in Super Bowl odds going into the season.
Oh, yeah.
Those lines have probably changed since Sunday, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those where you think about, a healthy Burrow, things coming together. They should be right there. And obviously they weren't this past weekend.
Yours truly picked them to win 12 plus games and endorsed Joe Burrow for MVP. So I got personally, selfishly, a lot riding on a bounce back performance. I said earlier this week, like, I'm not panicking about the Bengals. We've seen them do this 5 or 6 times at this point. They're slow starters, but you go back and watch that game though. And I know T. Higgins wasn't out there. I know Jamar Chase missed training camp. Joe Burrow himself this week said he had happy feet. He didn't feel completely comfortable in the pocket. I don't love to hear that from a guy that's widely regarded as a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. I especially don't love to hear it when you're going into a matchup against Chris Jones, who showed us in the season opener that he's capable of wrecking an offense all on his own. I do worry about that. I'm not saying Joe's not a good quarterback. I know he is, but I wonder how long the runway is there for him to reacclimate and get more comfortable, because if you're not comfortable in the pocket against New England, I don't know how many opponents you're going to be comfortable in the pocket against. At least that's my maybe over anxious reaction after week one.
No, and it's not even about Cincinnati has to win. Cincinnati just has to play well. I don't think very many teams you say, they should go into Arrowhead and win. I just think that offense, they need to lose this game 31-24 and not 31-10 or something worse than that. I mean, in the Kansas City, I don't think Kansas City played an amazing game to win their opener. I think Worthy made a couple plays and they kind of got it done, but they weren't dominant. They didn't look unbeatable. So, I mean, I think Cincinnati, more than anything else, just has to look like a contender, look like a team that could go into Arrowhead in January and hold their own, and we don't know that right now. So, I mean, I think just them offensively showing up, they're pass rushers. I mean, Hendrickson, you're going to talk about him going up against a rookie left tackle. There's opportunities and vulnerabilities there. They just have to, if you can't beat the Patriots, many things have to change before you talk about them beating the Chiefs a week later.
I think that's such a good point. And actually, like I said about the Bengals starting slowly, they've started 0-2 each of the last 2 years and have managed. I mean, they really got back on track in 2022. Obviously, they were trending in the right direction last year before Joe Burrow got hurt. So losing is not a problem. Looking as discombobulated as they did in week one, that would be a problem. And I do think it's going to be a challenge. We're recording this early, but as of right now, we don't know T. Higgins' status for this game. He might miss this one as well. But I don't know, at the risk of sounding harsh, it almost feels like no excuses. Again, not for winning, but for at least looking like a team that we think of as a contender, because that just wasn't the case in week one.
Yeah. And honestly, I had thought they might have a little insulation against being shorthanded at receiver. They got a rookie now, a Jermaine Burton, that I thought would be a better player. I think he can still be an impact rookie. I saw him in preseason. He had a touchdown in preseason. I thought he was going to be a guy that could, step in as their 3, maybe make them feel better about losing T. Higgins a year from now. And I think Burton played 4 snaps. I mean, he was a non-entity in the game, and maybe he'll do more this week. But, they kind of look like a team that was missing pieces, hadn't played together much. Some teams can do that in the preseason where your starters are barely playing and you flip a switch and it clicks in week 1 and all is good. They weren't that team.
I know you mentioned, I think it's fair to say the Chiefs weren't dominant. Obviously, they came a toenail away from going to overtime or maybe losing that game because John Harbaugh was going to go for 2 before the catch was overturned. But having said that, but based on that performance, do you even have any questions about the Chiefs? Like, of course, we can nitpick if we want to. Their rookie left tackle had his fair share of struggles. Hollywood Brown is still missing. Travis Kelce had a quiet night, but the defense did its thing. Didn't look like it was missing L'Jarius Sneed too much. Chris Jones wrecked shop. Patrick Mahomes, other than one, errant throw that got intercepted, sure as hell looked like the best quarterback in the game to me. I just don't have any questions about Kansas City. They could lose this game, and until further notice, I'm just going to be like, yeah, they're really good. They're going to win a lot of games.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's so chalky to think about the Chiefs as a Super Bowl team coming to the AFC. We had to pick for Fox's website, and I didn't pick the Chiefs. I took Texans and Lions in the Super Bowl, and you almost do that just because there's so little gain by correctly picking an overwhelming favorite to get back to the Super Bowl.
You're trying to zag where everybody else is zigging, basically.
Yeah, no, it's one of those. Hey, good job thinking the Chiefs would be good this year. Thanks, Greg. But that's who they are, and the pieces are, they've lost some pieces from that team. But even like you said, even without Brown, even with breaking in a rookie tackle, even with penalties, probably more you'd like him to have, they still were in control against a really good playoff team. Another. Probably a top 5 NFL team in Baltimore, probably when it's all done here. And that's who they are. So again, for Cincinnati to go in, if Cincinnati can get the ball with a chance to tie the game at the end, I would consider this a big win and a huge step forward from where they were in week 1.
I completely agree. I'm sorry if that's boring for Chiefs fans, but I don't think there's another team in the league really. You can find something for every team where you're like, oh, how do we feel about this? How do we feel about that? I watched the first game of the season. Kansas City beats the Ravens, and I was like, okay, I've seen everything that I need to see. If they can do that in all 3 phases against Baltimore, they're probably right where they need to be. And of course, they're going to lose games. That's not my point, but they're just in a very good spot, even if they lose this game, which the more I think about it, that would be so peak Bengals to blow it against New England and go out and beat the reigning champs. So, nothing would shock me in this series.
Right. Everybody thought they'd be 1-1 after 2 games, just not that way.
Not that way around. Exactly. Greg, love talking, man. Really looking forward to both of these games. Enjoy DFW. Hit me up on the side. We'll get some barbecue Rex going. Thanks, man.
Please. Thanks, man.
All right, week 2, the Indianapolis Colts heading up to Lambeau Field to take on the Green Bay Packers in the early window, and our buddy Greg Olsen will be there on the call. Greg, I guess officially we're going to keep an eye on Jordan Love because the Packers are adamant that they're going to give him every opportunity, and we hope that comes to fruition. But unofficially, everybody's preparing to see Malik Willis make his 4th career start, first one since 2022. I'm just curious, Malik Willis traded to the Green Bay Packers from the Tennessee Titans just about 2 weeks ago. I'm curious, from your perspective as a guy who spent a lot of time in the league, when you've got to get a quarterback ready on short notice like this, what does that week look like in the meetings and the preparation? What is Matt LaFleur doing to get this new quarterback ready to go?
Yeah, there's no question. Getting ready to play in the NFL is hard to begin with, let alone if you're, relatively few starts, not a lot of time and experience, and especially at the quarterback position. So all things considered, not an easy feat. The one thing I will say is last year's backup, Sean Clifford, still on the squad. The fact that they made Malik Willis the backup last week, and he was the guy number 2 that did come in again for mop up, there was only a couple plays remaining left in the game. But I think it does, that should tell us something. If he felt that he was not prepared to operate even just the baseline system, he would have just kept the same guy and gone with Clifford and say, hey, let's just manage this and just get through it until Jordan Love is able to come back. So he obviously sees something in Malik Willis that gives him the optimism that he'll know enough of the system. And then listen, we saw this guy play in college. He was a third round draft pick. A lot of people thought he was a first round talent, and he kind of had that epic fall. He's a guy that has a lot of physical talent. We've seen him again at the college level, but there's no question that it's in there. And if there's one thing Matt LaFleur has shown, he can develop quarterbacks, and his system can take a lot of the stress off quarterbacks and protect them earlier in their career. So again, I don't know if Malik Willis is going to have a Jordan Love type year from last year or a game. I think that's asking a lot. But Matt LaFleur knows quarterbacks, and he would only be putting him out there ahead of Clifford if he felt confident in what he could do.
I'm projecting a lot right now, and I apologize. I mean, we've seen so little of Malik Willis to this point in his career, but the skill sets aren't totally different. Like, he's an athletic guy with a huge arm. Like, it doesn't, to your point, it doesn't seem like this is a situation where you have to like radically change the offense overnight. I mean, Willis is still, obviously he just got there. I'm sure he's still learning the scheme, but it doesn't seem like you should have to change things too drastically, or am I off base?
No, I think in the post-Rodgers era, I think last year, again, it was a perfect sample size for the entire course of the season. It was really our first glimpse at what a true vision of a Matt LaFleur offense really looked like. And again, to no one's fault, if you have Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, you were going to run your offense through the lens of what the quarterback feels comfortable and what Rodgers preferred. He didn't love all the under center. He didn't love the condensed formations with all the jet motions and the pre-snap motion. Rodgers wanted guys set. He wanted to see the defense. So again, radically different than how LaFleur wants it. They got back to running that last year. Obviously, Jordan Love had a tremendous year, especially over the back half of the season. So I think the system in place is a plug-and-play system. Now, can you do more things with Jordan Love, his talent, his experience now in the system? Of course. To expect Malik Willis to be able to run the entire system no different, I think is unrealistic. But I think as far as systems go, that you can plug in a young, inexperienced quarterback that does have some physical talent, like you said, the LaFleur, the McVay, the Kyle Shanahan, that tree, we've seen a lot of quarterbacks have success in it.
Let me ask you this. I'm nothing if not thorough. And I remember, I'm taking you back to 2019. It's not a one-to-one comparison, but Kyle Allen had to step in for y'all when Cam Newton got hurt. You're 0-2 on the year. Cam goes down. And I know Kyle Allen had been there a lot longer than Malik Willis has been in Green Bay, but he steps in and he balled out the next week. He led y'all to a win. You had a phenomenal game, 6 for 75 and 2 touchdowns. Do you have any memories of like coaching Kyle Allen through that process? And like I said, like what is the week like in the facility when you're trying to get a new quarterback ready to go?
Yeah, it's a great comp. And listen, I'm sure that the people in Green Bay would love nothing more. Yeah, we went to Arizona in Kyle's first ever start. The world was coming to an end, and we found out Cam was hurt and he was going to be out. It turned out the whole season. We were hoping it was just a couple weeks. But yeah, Kyle did a great job. Obviously a big part of why he's in the league to this day, because people have a lot of confidence that if he is needed to play, that he can do it, because they've seen him play at a high level there, especially as a young player. So I think you have to be careful during the week. You don't over prepare. You don't spend 20 hours a day. And I've read every play and I think there could be paralysis by analysis. You're not going to learn the entire playbook by crash course studying. You still have to allow enough room in your brain to go out there and just read, react, and trust your instincts. You've been playing football for a long time. So I do think there's a fine line between preparation, understanding the system, understanding the ways of the play caller and what Matt LaFleur wants to see. But you don't want to be a robot. You don't want to spend every waking second of your life crammed in a book and just make yourself paralyzed. So I do think you can over prepare in these settings. It's like kind of like waiting to the last minute to study for a test and you try to stay up all night. It's kind of the same idea. If Malik Willis is prepared, which I'm sure Matt LaFleur will get him prepared, he's shown he has a great ability to do that. you don't need him to do everything. They have some other really good weapons on the team. He's got a great young arsenal of offensive weapons. Use them, use the system, use your play caller to generate some shots downfield, plays that you're comfortable with. You're playing at home. Your defense is going to have to show up and keep this Colts team kind of at bay, especially on the deep ball stuff. You don't have to go out there and do it yourself.
That's music to my ears, because my philosophy as a student was like, you know what? I know it or I don't. Let's go in here. Like, let's not stress out too much about it. So we'll see how it goes for Malik Willis if he does, in fact, get this start. Over on the other side, I mean, week one, it's crazy how we just got the entire Anthony Richardson experience in one game, like 200 yards. Everybody's seen the incredible throw to Alec Pierce, 65 air yards on a rope. But he also, only 9 completions on the day, an interception, just a very, like I said, you get the really, really good with some of the growing pains of a guy with so little experience. What was your overall takeaway looking at him and looking at his first game back?
It was exactly that. One play, you're like, that's the greatest throw I've ever seen in my life. I don't know if there's another guy in the league that can even do it. And then you miss like a layup, right? You got a guy wide open in the red zone for a walk-in touchdown on a double move, and he just airmails it. And listen, I think there's going to be a little of that give and take, but he is just such a unique prospect. I think he kind of got lost in the fray last year to the CJ Stroud, Bryce Young kind of debate. I know he lost his rookie year due to injury after only, 4 games or whatever it was. But man, it is hard not to get excited. If you're a Colts fan and you watched week one, I know you didn't win. I know it didn't go, but tell you what, the guy's nothing if he's not entertaining. He reminds me so much of Cam in so many ways, right? Big arm, downfield passing game, especially early in his career. He's not going to have 70% completion percentage, but guess what? It doesn't matter. If you're generating explosive plays through the air, you're not going to be a 70% completion guy. Those are the dinks and dunks underneath. That's not what he is. And Shane Steichen understands that. They're going to throw the ball downfield. They're going to generate explosives off their play action game, off their run game. He's going to operate out of the shotgun, which, again, in today's day and age, we know getting under center is a great way to run play action offense, unless you have guys like Anthony Richardson and Cam Newton and those threats, because you want them in the gun. You want their threat of run. You want them to be counted on the defense as one of the numbers in the box. So it's he is fun. I'm excited to see him in real life. And my favorite play of him from the entire day was 4th and goal, game on the line, trying to stay close. They call a pass, and he just said, screw it. I'm just going to run everybody over on the side, on the goal line, and score a touchdown to keep it within, I think put it within 3 or 2 or whatever it was.
2 points, yeah.
Yeah, so he that is like Cam Newton at his finest. I saw it for 10 years. So I think the sky's the limit. I think Shane Steichen is a phenomenal coach. I think he's going to get the best out of him. Good O-line, good run game, the play action game, the quarterback runs, and then deep explosive pass game. If you can do those things in the NFL, you got a shot.
I love the way, and like, we all get it. Anthony Richardson's not a finished product, but everybody that talks about him, your eyes kind of light up and your voice goes up a little bit. Like, some of the stuff that this guy can do is just incredible. I wanted to ask you this, and you touched on it. Obviously, you were around a guy in Cam who, one of the best running quarterbacks, one of the best short yardage quarterbacks ever. And Anthony Richardson did that in week 1, 56 rushing yards. You mentioned the touchdown. Obviously, that's such a key part of his skill set. How do you find the balance between how valuable that is and keeping your quarterback out of harm's way?
Well, I think that's the $1 million question. And I think that's what every offensive play caller goes through, and the evolution of a young quarterback who has that ability to be mobile, and not just every now and then, but like, we could have used Cam Newton as a featured running back. Like, he was that good. He was big, he was strong, he was fast. You just have to be careful, right? There's the ebbs and flows. And I think early on in their careers, what we've seen as they learn and develop as a passer, which is not unique to running quarterbacks, it's every young quarterback. The difference with these guys is, while they're developing as passers, you have this whole other area of the playbook that you can activate and use in the meantime. And then typically as they develop as passers, they're used less as runners because now there's the longevity conversation. So you got to pick your spots. Game on the line, 3rd and 4th down, no brainer. You got to activate the quarterback run game. Obviously, he's always going to be there as a scrambler on pass plays that he improvises. And in the red zone on the goal line, it's the ultimate weapon. So it's situational and it's 3rd and long and it's not down there. Hey, man, you got to tuck it and go and keep this drive alive. I think in the beginning you use it like that, but if the game is on the line, you cannot be afraid to run your big quarterback. He's as big as anybody out there on the field.
He sure is. Oh man, I'm getting excited just talking about it. I mean, 2 young teams, Lambeau Field. Even if Jordan Love can't go, I think there's a lot of reason to be excited about this one. Greg, I hope you enjoy the call, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks, buddy. Good to see you.
I promised at the top of the show a Thursday night preview, so let's jump right into it. Thursday, 8:15 p.m. Eastern Time, the Buffalo Bills go down south for a grudge match with the Miami Dolphins. I say grudge match because it's a divisional rivalry and there's animosity and the fan bases want to win, but if I'm previewing this game, I think it's only right to start with the fact that it hasn't really been a rivalry for most of the time that Josh Allen has played for the Buffalo Bills. Few stats for you. Dolphins fans, cover your ears. Josh Allen is 10-2 in the regular season against the Miami Dolphins. You can even throw in a playoff game if you want to. He's 11-2 if you count that Skylar Thornton wildcard game a couple years ago. He's 6-1 when he plays Tua Tagovailoa. So since Tua was drafted, a very lopsided affair. And it's not just that Josh Allen wins a lot, because I get it. I don't view wins as a quarterback stat. So it's not just the wins. Josh Allen balls against the Miami Dolphins. In those games, an average of 280 passing yards per game and an average of 53 rushing yards per game. He's thrown 33 touchdown passes against Miami, which at this young stage in his career, Josh Allen's what, 28 years old? 28 years old. 33 passing touchdowns is the second most against the Miami Dolphins in NFL history. Only our own Tom Brady has more. Granted, he's got a way to go to catch Tom, but still, he's already in rare territory. He's thrown multiple touchdowns every single time he's played the Dolphins. It's the longest streak by a quarterback against one single opponent in the history of the NFL. Throw in 5 rushing touchdowns, you get the picture. Average passer rating of 110 when he goes against Miami. So if I'm betting on one thing, now I know he injured his hand a little bit in the Cardinals game, but Josh Allen's been practicing this week. He's going to be fine. And if I had to guess, he's going to ball out at Hard Rock Stadium. To be fair to the Miami Dolphins, he could ball out and still lose the game. Miami looks like exactly the team we remember from last year. Tua leads the league in passing after week 1. He was one of only 2 quarterbacks in week 1 to hit the 300-yard threshold. He and Tyreek Hill spurred a comeback against the Jags. And in addition to this just being the most explosive passing game in the NFL, the Bills, stop me if you've heard this before, are dealing with problems on their back end. Teron Johnson, their starting nickel cornerback, went out early in week 1 against Arizona. He's out for this game. So the Bills secondary already a problem spot heading into the season. Remember, they lost Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. Jordan Poyer actually a Miami Dolphin now, so throw in a little revenge element to this whole thing. The Dolphins could put up a ton of passing yards in this game. I mean, I tend to trust that Sean McDermott will figure it out. He did it against Arizona last week. Cardinals were moving the ball really well in the first half. Nothing doing after halftime. But the speed element on this Miami team, even for the NFL, it's on a different level. On top of that, Raheem Mostert already out for this game. Devon Achane, their other incredibly fast running back. Actually, they've got freaking 3 of them. I swear, Mike McDaniel only cares about 40 times, but it works. Not a criticism. Point being, they could be at least thin at running back for this game. So you might even see an even crazier target share than what we're used to for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. I'm guessing the Bills are just going to throw cloud coverage up there. Like, hey, we'll play cover 2, cover 3, cover 6, whatever makes them throw the ball underneath. And we'll just try to tackle and keep those catches from becoming explosive 80-yard touchdowns like the one we saw Tyreek take to the house the other day. I'm not confident in it, but I'm going to take Josh Allen just because that track record I just listed off. I'll take that. I'll take the Bills' dominance. I'll feel good about it. And I usually hate this. I hate to be weather guy. I think it's one of the most overrated things we talk about when we preview NFL games. But I do think the Dolphins lose one of their biggest advantages in this matchup in this game. It's September in Miami, and you're playing at night. It's an unfortunate quirk of the schedule because if I'm playing a team from Buffalo, I want those guys standing on the sideline. People talk about this all the time. The visitors' sideline at Hard Rock Stadium just gets pounded by the sun. I want the dudes from Buffalo standing in the heat, just getting wrecked by the sun for 3.5 hours and getting worn down. I don't think it's a coincidence. Josh Allen's only loss to the Tua Dolphins was week 3 in 2022 in a 1:00 game. So it was hot as hell and the sun was beating down on everybody and the Bills ran out of time at the very end. It's the only time it's happened. I doubt it's a coincidence that they were playing in 90 whatever degree weather for 3.5 hours. It won't be the case tonight. Sun sets a half hour before kickoff. It'll be like 82, but that's completely manageable. You drink some Gatorade to deal with the humidity. I think it'll be fine. I think it matters that the Dolphins don't have that advantage. I'm taking Josh Allen. I'm taking the Buffalo Bills, but man, I hope this is as fun as it looks on paper. Let's keep it pushing to one of the best matchups of week 2, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up to Detroit in a rowdy environment at Ford Field against the Detroit Lions. That's why it's on the road, presented by Honda. Dreams are unstoppable. And to help us preview Lions Buccaneers, our friend Daryl Moose Johnston will be on the call in Detroit. Moose, good to see you, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Good to see you.
So a couple things. First of all, you've already seen the Bucs this year. You were on the call for Tampa Bay, Washington last week. But on top of that, you called Bucs Lions last year. I know I'm going back a little bit, but way back in week 6. I'm curious for your perspective. You go back to week 6 last year. The Lions were kind of a test for the Buccaneers. They did not pass that one. The Lions won 20-6, a fairly easy win for them. And now the Buccaneers, they go on this run. They win the division. They win a playoff game, looking like a much improved team, and they looked phenomenal last week. What's your impression of the way the Buccaneers have sort of grown, evolved, gotten better here over the last calendar year or so?
Yeah, I think right around that time that they played last year in week 6, that was kind of the start of a little bit of a big bump in the road for Tampa Bay. I think they went 1-5, 1-6 during the course of the middle of the season. And I think that was right around that time when that started. I actually went back and watched that game today. And it looked very different than the playoff game. Both teams, obviously, from week 6 through to the divisional round, much improved. And I really felt that, one of the areas that Tampa Bay struggled in, not just last season, but the last 2 years is running the football. They've been the lowest ranked team in the NFL when it comes to, total rushing yards and yards per carry. But in that playoff game, they ran the ball very effectively against that Detroit front. So, I think it was a big test for them last year. I don't think anybody gave Tampa Bay any chance, even going into the playoffs, against Philadelphia in the wild card round. And then they end up with the football in their possession, down 8 with a little under 2 minutes to go to kind of, go in and push a tie and maybe get to overtime in the divisional round. So that created a lot of positives coming off the season last year. And then I think what's really energized the whole organization, not just on the offensive side, but this is kind of built in to the defensive side when you talk about the complementary component in the game of football. But Liam Cohen coming in and Jason Light and his group really kind of solidifying that offensive line on the interior and them starting to really focus on the run game. And this comes off that LA Rams tree and the Sean McVay tree when you talk about, from Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, down to Matt LaFleur, down to Kevin O'Connell, now it's Liam Cohen. And you see a lot of similarities there. The guys really love the offense that they're doing. I think that it gives them more opportunities, to do different things. And then you get to play off the Chris Godwin component. Baker has a lot more control at the line of scrimmage. So we get down to Tampa Bay last week. And I had one of the first questions I had to ask Todd Bowles was, early in the offseason, the first time they came together as a team, he said, we're raising our expectations. We're not talking about winning the division. We're talking about winning the whole thing. And they really got into the Super Bowl talk and the Super Bowl conversation right away. And it was kind of like, well, why not us? Obviously you've got your Kansas Cities and your San Franciscos, but I think they felt last season, the way they finished up and how they played through the playoffs, why not us this season? Because there is a lot of positivity, through that facility when you're around them.
I know you don't win anything in week 2, but I mean, we just talked about it. Going back to last year in the regular season and the postseason, they can't get past the Lions. Even after a nice win on Sunday, Vegas still sees this as a 7.5-point game in the Lions' favor. Like, people still clearly think of the Lions as a much better team than the Buccaneers, at least on paper. We talk so much, narrative's a big part of it, but this feels like a measuring stick game. Like, what can this game show the Buccaneers about who they are? How do you feel about the concept of a measuring stick, in the sense of, I mean, there's a lot of season left no matter what happens, but having an early opportunity to kind of measure yourself against a truly great team?
Well, because they played in the divisional round last year, I don't know if the measuring stick component, is really the true one. If they were a team that was trying to get to the playoffs, I think that works out a little better. Hey, let's see where we are compared to one of the NFC Championship game participants last season. But because Detroit was there, with a little under 2 minutes to go, with the football in their possession, with an opportunity to score 8 points and tie it up, I think that they're very confident in that. I think that this is more of a gauge, and you hear a little bit of it from Dan Campbell as well. Knowing last weekend against the Rams, they did not play their best football. We just got to get better each week. And I think, it's more, if it's a measuring stick, it's more of a measuring stick to where are you right now? Because I think that the way that you approach the preseason, and there's not a lot of time for the starters. There's a few teams that will do that. Andy Reid, still has, Patrick Mahomes and a lot of the starters out there, but it's something in the NFL that you don't see, very often with teams. The starting groups are not getting a lot of snaps. So you're going to have some bumps in the road, through the first month of the season. And so this is really looking at that progression. And I think when you talk about these two teams, I think it's more of an internal measuring stick than it is a measuring stick as to where do we sit in the landscape of the NFC right now. So I think really for both of these teams, coming off of a game last week where I'm sure if you ask Dan Campbell, wasn't real clean. We won the game. That's the most important thing, but there's a lot of areas we need to get better in. If you were to talk to Todd Bowles, happy with some of the areas that we showed improvement from last season. But that was a team that has a brand new head coach and a brand new staff and a rookie quarterback. And they're just starting that journey. They're just starting that process to become a good football team again. So we should have handled our business there. So I think really for Todd Bowles and for Dan Campbell, this is more of a measuring stick as to where are we at with our team and where we want to be. How close are we to the standard that we hold ourselves accountable to, and where we want to be when we get to the month of December and January?
You are the perfect person to ask this question to, a legendary fullback, lead blocker for Emmitt Smith for so many yards, touchdowns, wins. I know they didn't do it the same way that y'all used to do it in Dallas, but how do you feel watching the Detroit Lions go into overtime of that game? 6 runs out of 7 plays, just mashing the ball downfield for a game-winning touchdown. I mean, a very fun throwback to a different era of football, it felt like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really, I love the first play call, the end around. I thought that was a great play call by Ben Johnston. You expect everybody to be amped up at that time. I loved a little bit of the motion that they incorporated to it. It looked like it was going to the right, and then you get the end around coming the opposite direction. And then you hit him with David Montgomery on the next play. And when you rip off a 21-yard run in overtime, everybody talks about the hot hand. It's not much harder than it is right then. So yeah, just keep giving David the ball, get him behind that big offensive line. It reminded me when we came out of halftime of our second Super Bowl. And Buffalo had done some really good things defensively to really impact our run game between the tackles. And that was really kind of where our bread and butter was back at that time. We were not really a big perimeter run team. We were more between the tackles. And the way they were doing it it was going to force us to kind of get more out on the edge. And we had a play that we'd run about a month before, and it was something that was in our repertoire, but we hadn't really repped it a whole lot. So at halftime of the Super Bowl, we kind of sat down and went through everything. Here's what they're doing. Here's how that will impact the blocks and create some angles. And eventually they've got to get out of this. And then we'll get back to what we do between the tackles. Well, Buffalo never got out of it. And if you remember that opening drive of the second half, it looked like the same play going down the field. Emmett right, Emmett left, Emmett left, Emmett right, Emmett right. That's exactly what it was. It was power, and it was either power right or power left. And Buffalo just never adjusted to it. And that drive reminded me a lot of that, especially once they got down in tight, because it really looked like it was just a duo scheme. And it was just that Detroit offensive line coming off the ball and knocking people back. And it was like 3 times in a row. It looked like the exact same play call before David Montgomery got into the end zone. So I love that. I love that. But I really think it all started off with that first play call, that end around that really kind of got everybody kind of back on their heels a little bit. And then you just get downhill on them.
Which, and it's not like this is new in the sense that, I mean, Detroit has had a fun offense for a couple of years now, and they've got all these great pieces on the offensive line. But between Jameson Williams now coming along and obviously Jahmyr Gibbs, I mean, we know they can do all of the more traditional power stuff, run right at you. They've got these great possession receivers like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta. But that element of speed in addition to it, I mean, if this keeps going the way it's going and Jameson Williams can do this consistently, I mean, is there a higher ceiling for an offense that's already one of the best in the league?
I think so. And I think that's why everybody was excited with the performance of Jameson Williams. And especially when you're going to take Amon-Ra St. Brown out of the game. And from a statistical standpoint, I think I read recently this week that was the lowest number of targets, catches, and yards he had going all the way back to a game in which he got pulled from the game when he had a concussion and only had one target, one catch. So you played the entire 60 minutes, and obviously the Rams focused on not letting Amon-Ra St. Brown be that guy that disrupts it. And then Jameson Williams just takes over the game. And just during the course of training camp, I followed Detroit all the way through training camp, just to get an idea how things were going. And one of the things that was a feature about every third or fourth day was the progress of Jameson Williams. And one of the things that everybody talked about was the patience of Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes and the organization. And I thought that was awesome, because here comes a guy, you move up to take him in the draft. He had an ACL the year before. He comes in, doesn't do a lot, gets caught up in the new gambling policy with the NFL the following year, misses 6 games, and comes back in. So you're 2 years into it, and you moved up to 12 to get this guy, and you still don't have anything. And they were not down on him. They were not critical of him. They just, hey, sometimes we got to learn some tough life lessons. That's one of the things I love about Dan Campbell is it's football and life together. And, it's like a Ted Lasso episode, football is life. And, you get into that and you talk about the patience and the opportunity to become the player we knew you were. And he does that in the opening game. But the biggest thing is, and we had it on the other side in our game last week when Tampa Bay just took Terry McLaurin out of the game, and Washington doesn't have that number 2 yet. And so is it Austin Eckler? Who's it going to be? And they've got to get that sorted out, because I think that was one of the biggest things that Tampa Bay exposed Washington to right now, is if you can take Terry McLaurin out of the game, you got a really good chance of winning it, because there's really nobody there right now to step in and fill that void. Detroit has that guy now. And it was something they always talked about, who's going to be our 3, who's going to be that big X receiver. They brought in Tim Patrick. They've got Allen Robinson. They've got some options that are there. But when you've got a number 2 that can do what Jameson Williams did for you, that's such a huge, huge plus for that offense.
That Dallas Cowboys team you brought up, Super Bowl 28. I knew the basic gist, but I wanted to get it exactly right. Outscored the Bills 24-0 after halftime en route to that championship. I have a feeling if the Lions can replicate that, they'll be very happy. I'm so excited for just a great early season test between two teams with a lot of high hopes for the season. Moose, I hope you have a great call, man. I appreciate the time.
Yeah, enjoyed it.
All right, next big game for week 2 that we'd like to preview is an NFC West matchup. The LA Rams opening division play on the road at the Arizona Cardinals. That's in the late window right here on Fox 105 Pacific, 4:05 Eastern to talk about it. Hopped on with my good buddy Eric Williams of foxsports.com. Check it out. All right, Eric, I thought the Arizona Cardinals caught a bad break on Sunday afternoon. They lose right tackle Jonah Williams early on against Buffalo. And then the LA Rams said, hold my beer, because it seems like their entire offensive line is now dealing with injury, in addition to the suspension to left tackle Alaric Jackson. I think I know the answer to this, but these are two teams with reason for concern about their offensive line. Who are you more worried about going into this matchup?
You're right. I think I'm probably more worried about the Rams in terms of their quarterback, Matthew Stafford, and the importance that they put going into the season in terms of making additions so they could protect him so he could stay healthy. And when you look at what's going on with the Rams right now, it harkens back to the 2022 season when they played 12 different starting offensive line combinations through the first 13 games. Obviously, that year, Matthew Stafford ended up in the injury reserve with a bruised spinal cord. So I think it's really, are they going to be able to protect him so he can go out there and make the plays that he normally makes? They threw the ball 50 times against the Lions last week. That doesn't seem sustainable for Stafford and this team. The reason that they were so good offensively last year, other than, discovering Puka Nacua and him having historic rookie season, is they had balance. They had Kyron Williams run for over 1,000 yards. But as you mentioned, with all the different issues they're having up front, Steven Avila is going on IR. Rob Havenstein, their right tackle, didn't play last week because of a right ankle injury. They don't know if they're going to get him back. Their right guard, Kevin Dotson, also an ankle. They're not sure if he's going to play. Alaric Jackson, not available because of suspension. His backup, Joe Noteboom, also has an ankle injury. So you could be looking at their third offensive tackle. Pretty big concerns in terms of being able to protect Matthew Stafford.
Let me ask you this. I mean, and you teed it up perfectly, because 2022 is still fresh in my mind. Matthew Stafford didn't have much of a chance. It led to him getting injured as well. Early in that game against Detroit, they go down 17-3, and I'm watching on TV thinking, here we go again. This could be really bad for Stafford and for the Rams. I hope that they're not about to lose their season. But then they come out after halftime and Stafford went off. Clearly, him and Cooper Kupp kind of turned back the clock. He was playing amazing. Is that sustainable with these injuries on the offensive line? And if it is, I mean, what is the key to kind of keeping that going while they sort out these offensive line issues?
I think it's sustainable in terms of they have the playmakers that can go out and still get it done in the perimeter. I was able to talk to Cooper Kupp a couple different times this offseason, and he said he's kind of back to being who he was when he was the Triple Crown winner during that Super Bowl season. And it's because of his health. For the first time in 3 years, he could actually work on his craft instead of having to recover from all the nagging injuries that he's had over the last couple of years. So with Puka Nacua out, obviously you have a number one guy that you can go to in Cooper Kupp. But they also have other guys in the perimeter, in Tyler Johnston and Darius Robinson. Tutu Atwell will probably take on a larger role in the offense. They signed Colby Parkinson in free agency because Tyler Higbee is still coming back from ACL surgery. He will probably play a larger role in that offense. And then you're going to have to turn to Kyron Williams and hand him the football. But you can't do any of that if you don't get consistent offensive line play. And so I'm interested to see what the offensive line combination is going to be. Again, I don't think it's sustainable for Matthew to throw for 50 times a game and last for the duration of the season, because I don't feel like they'll be able to protect him consistently. So they're going to have to run the football a little bit.
Well, fortunately for them, I think this is a favorable matchup for that, just in terms of what Arizona's bringing to the table. We'll see how it goes. On the flip side, I don't think it's not time to panic about Marvin Harrison Jr., because I looked this up. Even in the last 5 years, plenty of successful receivers have had lackluster debuts. Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore, both got off to slow starts, we'll say. But Marvin Harrison Jr., 1 catch for 4 yards. It's the worst career debut by a top 5 pick at receiver since Desmond Howard, Eric. That is not where we want to be. How concerned should we be about that slow start? What can the Cardinals do to fix it?
Yeah, I think anytime we start going back to high top fades, it's a little concerning.
Yeah, it's not good.
So yeah, it's definitely an issue, and we talked about this a little bit. The play speed, is it where it needs to be? Kind of looked a little bit sluggish. Because of that conversation, I reached out to a scout just to kind of get a handle on what his play speed was like in college. Obviously, he didn't run, didn't do any of the testing. And talking to a scout about where he was in college, said he maxed out at 21 miles per hour in terms of their GPS tracking. All college athletes have GPS tracking right now. That put him in the 73rd percentile in terms of receivers over the draft history, which, is not elite, but is not awful either. It's good enough to get it done. I was able to watch Marvin in training camp. And to me, having covered the Chargers for several seasons, he reminded me a lot of Mike Williams, in terms of his ability as a big guy to stretch the field. He's not going to run away from you, but he's tough. He's going to win a lot of contested catches. And so I think with somebody like Harrison, you have to feed him in order to kind of build that trust and give him opportunities. He had no targets in the second half. So obviously they're still trying to work on that in terms of Harrison and Kyler Murray. Murray seems to trust other receivers more like Greg Dortch and Trey McBride, and that makes sense because he's more used to throwing to those guys. And then the other thing I think we talk about is, their offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, said they were rolling coverage to Harrison's side, which is kind of crazy that you're rolling coverage to a rookie. So that shows kind of the respect that the Bills had defensively in terms of what they thought he could do as a playmaker. I think this is a good matchup going into Sunday for Harrison because of what's happening in the secondary for the Rams. They don't have Darius Williams, who was their top free agent signing in terms of the secondary because of a hamstring injury. His replacement, Kobe Durant, has a toe injury, so I'm not sure if he's going to be able to go. Tre'Davious White is obviously coming off a significant surgery and is playing on the other side. So I think there's a chance for Harrison to have a splash game at home for the Cardinals. Last thing, McVay's 13-2 against the Cardinals. This is a matchup that he looks forward to.
I can imagine when you've got a winning percentage like that. Yeah, I mean, if you go back and watch that game, yeah, it is impressive. I know, he's this very hyped pick. He is still a rookie though, but the Buffalo Bills were paying plenty of attention to Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm not worried about it yet. I think he's going to play better this weekend, and not to be mean, but it would be almost impossible not to play better than 1 catch for 4 yards. So we're not writing the story of Marvin Harrison Jr. yet. I'm excited to see. I think we're in for some fireworks with this game between, Kyler Murray looked nice in his first game back. I thought Marvin Harrison Jr. nowhere to go but up. And you mentioned some of the Cardinals' other weapons as well. So I'm crossing my fingers for a lot of points for you to watch on Sunday in Glendale, Eric. I appreciate the time, man.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Let's take a beat to talk about the Fox Super 6 powered by DraftKings. If you're not familiar, here at Fox Sports on foxsports.com and the Fox Sports app, got a wonderful game, Super 6 powered by DraftKings. You essentially choose 6 prop bets from all over the league, all different kinds of categories. If you hit all 6, you can win some wonderful stuff. It's a very fun way to fill up a Sunday afternoon, give you a little added incentive while you watch your Sunday games. I'm going to help you out right now with one of them. I feel really good about it. You get your choice. Most receiving yards between Cooper Kupp at Arizona, CeeDee Lamb against New Orleans, Jameson Williams against Tampa Bay, or Mike Evans against Detroit. Any one of those 4, I'm telling you right now, I feel best about Cooper Kupp going to Arizona. We learned this week Puka Nacua is going to injured reserve, so Cooper Kupp is that much more important to the Rams offense. And also, did you see the way Matthew Stafford fed him the ball the other night against Detroit? I like Cooper Kupp to easily finish with the most of those. Good matchup against the Arizona defense as well. So that's one prop on your way to the Super 6. Pick 5 more. See what happens. I believe in you. Best of luck. All right, that just about does it for the Week 2 preview, but not quite. one last bit of business to get to, and that is our hurry up offense. Still a lot of games to talk about. We only previewed a handful of them. A lot more to say, not a lot of time to do it. So if you're new to the show, this is how we handle it. We call it the hurry up offense. My awesome producers going to give me 2 minutes on the clock, and I'm going to run you through the rest of these games, give you something to look forward to, something to know heading into your weekend. Going to do it basically in order of best game, in my opinion. We'll start with the bangers. We'll move down the list as we get toward the more unsavory editions of the week 2 schedule. Anyway, without further ado, I see 2 minutes on the clock if you're watching. Let's get it going right now. The Chicago Bears going down to play the Houston Texans. Big Sunday night game. Haven't been kind to the Bears. 7 straight Sunday night losses for Chicago. 9 straight Sunday night road losses. Have not won a road Sunday night game since Jay Cuddy was the QB in 2014. I'm still excited about the Bears. I just don't think this is the spot. I like the Texans. Let's take it over to the other primetime game. Monday night, the Atlanta Falcons going to Philly to play the Eagles. Steelers did not need to bring extra pressure against Atlanta last week. TJ Watt did everything on his own. Philly did not generate pressure so well with its front four. Bottom 10 in the league. Bryce Huff, the new D-end in Philly, no pressures in week 1. If Atlanta has to blitz Kirk Cousins, maybe that opens up some plays for the Falcons. I think the Falcons will be better. I still like the Eagles in this game. San Francisco 49ers at Minnesota Vikings. The Falcons are one of just 2 teams, the Vikings, are one of just 2 teams in the league that did not allow a touchdown in week 1. Meanwhile, the 49ers scored on 8 straight drives against the Jets the other night. If one of those 2 things is going to change, I like the Niners. Cleveland Browns at Jacksonville Jaguars. Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence sacked a combined 9 times in week 1. Feels important in a game that has Myles Garrett and Josh Hines-Allen. I'll take the Jags. Jets at Titans, head on a swivel, Aaron Rodgers. Titans were top 10 in blitz rate in week 1. Pressure's going to be coming everywhere. I think you're up to it, though. I'll take the Jets. Raiders at Ravens. I like the Ravens to win and cover, but I bet Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins have a nice day against that offensive line. Pittsburgh Steelers at Denver Broncos. Bo Nix, 3.3 yards per attempt, 2 picks, and now you're going against a better defense. Justin Fields might only need 14 points to win this game, and I think he can do it. I'll take the Steelers. Seahawks at Patriots. Peep this. Pats were the worst team in pressure rate allowed among O-lines. I know they won, but Mike McDonald's going to do something with that. Jacoby Brissett is in for a long day. LA Chargers at Carolina Panthers. I'll play through the buzzer. It's fine. You're not always going to get in under. Chargers at Panthers. I just can't believe that Carolina Panthers are a 6-point home underdog to the LA Chargers. It's fine if you're a touchdown underdog to a contender. Minnesota, a touchdown underdog to the 49ers. That makes sense. Being a touchdown underdog to a middle-of-the-pack Chargers team says a lot about how bleak things are in Carolina. I'll take the Chargers. Wrapping it up, we'll call it the Yuck Bowl. The New York Giants at the Washington Commanders. I don't know. It can't go worse for Daniel Jones than it did in week 1, or can it? Don't feel particularly good about either of these teams, but I'll take Jaden Daniels to get a win in his home debut, and that does it for the week 2 preview episode. So much to look forward to this weekend, and we will be back on Monday to recap all of it, the good, the bad, the fun, the wacky. Can't wait. We are back in the swing of things. Like I said at the top of the show, please, if you wouldn't mind, if you're not, give us a subscribe, give us a follow, go check in on the YouTube channel, and go find us on the socials. Anywhere you get your pods, anywhere you get your NFL news, we are with you all season, and we will have a full week 2 recap for you on Monday. Until then, I appreciate y'all taking the time to listen, to check in. I will chat with y'all real soon. I appreciate you.